Good morning, good people. My name is Martin from a company named Wayout. I believe we have an hour together, but I don't think I'll need more than about 30 minutes. So please save any thoughts or ideas or questions that you have for later, and we can have a conversation after I finish this little wrap. I will talk a little bit about our concept, but I will focus on why we do what we do. We call our solution future-proof drinking water, which is an outcome of totally rethinking how we can utilize natural resources and available technology so as to be able to stick around a while longer as a species. So what's up with future-proof? When we try to look into the future, it's a good idea to look back a bit and see what we can learn from the past and maybe understand better what a solution for tomorrow could be. Okay, that's it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again next year. Sorry, folks, jokes aside, but this is actually more true than we perhaps like to admit. I'll get back to this further ahead. On the topic of evolving or perhaps building up, this is the famous woodblock print, The Great Wave of Kanagawa by Japanese artist Hokusai, created in 1831. The print depicts a storm-tossed sea with a gigantic, ominous wave, frozen in time, towering over the insignificant lives of the fishermen in the tiny boats below, the moment before it comes crashing down, destroying everything. Nature and its irreversible forces are the main character, and humans are just extras or props to let us viewers think about their individual littleness and who or what really decides our fate. No, you're right, of course. This is an entirely different piece of graphics that actually depicts the human accomplishments that have enabled everything we have today. Progress, science, technology, discoveries, health, medicine, vaccines, fashion, travel, transport, tourism, food culture, pop culture, entertainment, shopping, heating up. But maybe Hokusai was onto something, albeit unbeknownst to him at the time, because in 1831, something was getting ready to start boiling, something with the distinct fragrance of burning oil. So let's go back a bit to see how we got here. Let's start by going back 50 years to 1974. It's the last year of the Vietnam War. The Cold War is at its peak. There's a global recession and political tension with domestic terrorism, coups, and nuclear testings around the world. Other notable water-related events that happened in 1974 were the Watergate scandal. Seems like history is repeating itself somehow. And in 1974, the Beatles break up. Any similarities with other submarines breaking up just yesterday are totally unintentional, of course. That would be too soon. Films released in 1974 are mostly disaster movies like Earthquake and The Towering Inferno. But there was also excitement. In 1974, the World Trade Center Twin Towers opened for business, and in 1974, Lucy is discovered in East Africa. Lucy, who incidentally got her name from a Beatles song, was an early human ancestor estimated to have lived around 3.2 million years ago. On the topic of friends and family and being high in the sky with diamonds, 50 years ago in 1974, we were exactly half as many human beings on this planet as we are today. Anatomically modern humans appeared already 300,000 years ago. Scientists estimate that in 1974, 113 billion humans had up until then existed on Earth. That means that 1 out of 30 humans ever to have existed was alive in 1974. Even though the scene looks familiar, pictured here is a peaceful protest against the Vietnam War. If you look closely, see the guy up in the right-hand corner? He really looks like Benny from ABBA, doesn't he? But there's no way that that's him, because in that very moment, he was on stage winning Sweden's first Eurovision Song Contest in Brighton, yay, with their song Waterloo, Waterloo doesn't have anything to do with sanitation or toilets or anything. It's about a megalomaniac emperor who thought he was invincible. Okay, sorry for getting carried away here. We were talking about unstoppable human self-centeredness. Today, 1 out of 15 humans ever to have existed is alive. And getting along or even acting responsibly is getting increasingly difficult. As recently as around 200 years ago, world population was only 1 billion. Around 100 years ago, it doubled, only to double again 50 years later to 4 billion in 1974. Now, imagine 50 years ago, let's pretend that Earth is a car, a Volvo, why not? 4 billion people are the passengers. Let's make it 4 for convenience. We're on a road trip together. 4 people, water, food, hygiene, cash, fuel. The roads, the adventures, and the available resources seem endless. Fast forward to today, when we've doubled again to 8 billion. Imagine 8 people in the same car. It would, of course, be challenging to consider everyone's needs, or to even get along in that limited space, burning through provisions, water, cash, fossil fuel at double speed. But we're in luck. The size of the cars has doubled also. On the topic of burning fuel and scaling up, 50 years ago, in 1974, we were just out of the first real oil crisis, exposing how dependent we already were on cheap energy. Back then, it had only been around 100 years since we started to industrially extract fossil fuel. Today, in just 150 years, cheap energy has enabled everything we now have. Again, science, technology, education, discoveries, health, culture, travel, transport, tourism, entertainment, consumption, construction, golden towers, or perhaps gilded cages, we'll see. But also, all of the excess greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which is the byproduct of what we call growth or progress. So, we can see how the abundance of cheap energy has enabled this species to go beyond its natural boundaries and lose connection to what actually keeps us alive, which of course comes with a price. The overuse of resources leading to social cascade effects, gaps, alienation, animosity, tension, wars, migrations, but also cascade effects on heat-absorbing gases in our atmosphere, leading to climate change as experienced in weather-related natural disasters, extreme temperatures, droughts, wildfires, storms, floodings, flash floods, landslides, and everything is, of course, entangled in a great big coiling up feedback loop. And speaking of how on a small round planet everything comes back, the exploitation of fossil fuel and petrochemicals has also given us plastic. Exactly 50 years ago, the PET bottle was invented. Today, 1.5 billion single-use plastic bottles are sold every day. Less than 10% is recycled. Most end up as landfill. It takes around 500 years for one single-use plastic bottle to degrade. In the meantime, it becomes microplastics. We all ingest the equivalent of 1 plastic credit card per week. In 50 years, a car tire. And we don't need any more of those when we're in our 50s. Thank you very much. At least 14 million tons of plastic flow into the ocean every year. Plastic makes up 80% of all marine debris found, from surface waters to deep sea sediments. Half of all plastic ever manufactured was made in the last 15 years. And today's production volume is expected to double by 2050, when scientists project there will be more plastic than fish in the oceans. On the topic of going with the flow, 50 years ago, we used about half the volume of water that we use now. Today, we use 4,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water every year. That's one lake, Mälaren, just outside your window if you're in Stockholm, every weekday all year around. The world average daily water footprint is per person 3.8 cubic meters. In large parts of the global north, we use almost double that, 6.5 cubic meters per person per day. Most is used to produce the food we eat, and only a tiny fraction is drinking water, something like 0.08%. But if we drink bad water, we get sick or die. So, what are the conditions for good quality drinking water around the world today? Let's have a look. In many regions around the world, drinking water is of unacceptable quality. The dark blue areas here are the regions with heavily contaminated source water, like from nitrogen, fluoride, or arsenic, either naturally occurring or introduced through farming and industry. Water is also increasingly unavailable in many parts of the world. The dark blue areas are the regions with severe physical water scarcity, where more water is used than can be replenished naturally. These are the regions with the highest population growth. They also happen to overlap with what we call economic water scarcity, where the costs of treating water can't be afforded publicly or privately, making water unavailable for the people there. Good quality drinking water is increasingly inaccessible. The dark blue areas are where urbanization happens to a higher degree. When people relocate from rural areas to urban, the shift adds pressure on existing infrastructure there and removes resources from rural areas. Access is concentrated to cities, and large portions of rural areas are left behind. In many densely populated regions, people can't afford good quality drinking water. The areas where unsafe water is particularly deadly is in regions with high presence of organic contaminants, where bacteria and parasites take over quickly, where water treatment isn't afforded or invested in. The darker areas are where societies and communities have other priorities than managing waste, or with fast population growth, making it difficult to keep up with adopting sustainable production methods. Through the local waterways, mismanaged plastic waste and chemicals eventually enter living organisms and cascade across the ecosystem. Many societies lack means and resources to prepare for climate change. The causes of climate change are mainly the lifestyles of us in the global north, but the effects mainly impact the global south. Climate change impacts drinking water through weather-related natural disasters, as well as through conflicts and migrations. People are displaced by conflict and wars, and also by natural disasters and changing conditions. Some are refugees within their country of origin. Some are forced to move elsewhere. These dynamics add pressure to the static systems in place, and also shift predictability and responsibilities around water availability. So, the situation is increasingly serious. If we look at the current available solutions, they too are laden with problems. Treatment isn't up to speed with current contamination. Regulations are in many cases old, but many contaminants are new, like microplastics, PFAs, or forever chemicals. Beside natural chemicals and microbes, there are introduced chemicals from fertilization, pesticides, pharmaceuticals, and industrial processes that prove increasingly complex to get rid of. The infrastructure is degrading. It's underground, out of sight, old, corroding. It leaks with contaminants entering, contaminants that can affect our health and our bodily functions. Chemicals and disinfectants are added to the piping system to kill off some of the bacteria and to improve the smell of the water. But people are increasingly not trusting municipal water for drinking, and so we turn to single-use plastic packaged water. Single-use plastic is a mounting problem. Microplastics leach from the packaging and into the water they contain. High temperatures and sunlight make it worse. This is a big health risk, actually, causing cancer, DNA fragmentation, cell death, allergies, heart disease, affecting hormones and fertility in adults and brain development in small children. Single-use plastic is also wasteful and unsustainable, where double the volume of water is used to create the plastic, 3 times the volume of CO2 is released than what water the package contains, and plastic water uses 2,000 times more energy than tap water. Long-distance transport of drinking water is completely unnecessary. This is a simple marketing thing, and someone is capitalizing on our willful gullibility. Global water brands ship their single-use plastic products across the planet, increasing our eco-footprint. The CO2 released speeds up global warming, and they leave behind the trash and take home the profit. In order to move away from single plastic, home filtration and in-house bottling is in some cases encouraged, like for the hospitality industry and for schools and campuses. But this requires them to move into a completely other line of business, into process industry, which requires a different expertise so as to not end up with clogging filters with mold, yeast, fungi, algae, and bacteria. Not to mention the risk of introducing bacteria into the treated water when capping the bottles manually. And the added manual handling itself with heavy glass bottles means even more work for staff and deliveries. These systems also don't eliminate micropollutants like viruses, forever chemicals, and microplastics. Home filtration and in-house bottling systems many times also don't add minerals to the drinking water. Minerals are essential not just for taste, but for key bodily functions. Drinking water that is insufficiently mineralized actually extracts minerals from your body and leaves you more dehydrated than before you drank it. This is particularly unhealthy for our children and our elderly, of course. There's also a lot of dishonest marketing in today's drinking water space. pH-altered water, like alkaline water and those things, don't bring any health benefits, but rather put stress on the inner organs. Exclusive water, like from glaciers or remote Pacific islands, is no different than ordinary water, other than that it has increased ecological impact, of course. And supernatural water, like so-called raw water, restructured water, or vortex-treated water, or claims that good or bad thoughts or vibrational frequencies would affect the water properties, is of course pseudoscience and will at best produce very expensive urine. What goes in is what comes out. You are what you eat or drink, and what goes up must come down. Thankfully, there's a greater trend where we are rethinking how we should go about our business as a species, and in a sense, how we can go back to the ways of our ancestors to restore the balance, or as a start, to act in balance with nature. We can see this as a political trend, as in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that set up guidelines for revised conduct with less impact on ecology, society, and economy, and with public and private stakeholders committing to these goals that are just 6.5 years away, mind you. There's a growing societal trend with increasing demand for local produce. We want fresh products. Local production brings resilience to pandemics, for instance. It connects us with producers and our communities. It supports our local community or an economy, and it increases transparency and reduces the overall eco-footprint. There's also a technological trend. The so-called fifth industrial revolution focuses on the well-being of all stakeholders within the economy, society, and ecology. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, automation, just-in-time, anything as a service, sharing platforms, and green technology are all about technology favoring people and planet, while at the same time enabling the businesses themselves to flourish with less ecological impact. And there are economical incentives. Securing water access by 2030 would cost around 1% of global GDP, whereas failing to secure water access could result in GDP losses of up to 10%. They say that water is the new oil, where investing in water access could yield an average return of 670%. There are opportunities, and there is a way out of this matrix, if you may. So here comes the turn, or the river for those of you that play poker. Our company, Wayout, provides circular systems for local supply of perfect drinking water from source to mouth with a minimal eco footprint. We offer our solution to local drinking water businesses who want to take lead in the green transition. Our water is of highest obtainable quality. We use state-of-the-art process where we also mineralize the water, and coming from pharma tech and food tech, hygiene and integrity is at the core of our concept. Our solution makes drinking water available anytime. The capacity of a single system is 20,000 liters per day, enough to provide between 5,000 and 10,000 people with their daily need of drinking water. Because we store and deliver the water in food-grade stainless steel eco kegs that are both hermetically and digitally sealed, the shelf life is near endless. The system is turnkey and modular, which makes it easy to operate and maintain. Our solution makes water accessible anywhere. The turnkey system is plug and play and produces water locally where it's needed. We can use any source water, non-conventional water resources, seawater, wastewater, or local surface water and groundwater. The system can be run on solar, making it completely autonomous where needed. Highest quality water doesn't have to be costly. Through automation and IoT, we're able to keep the power use to a minimum, below 3 kilowatt hours per cubic meter. Through government support by Swedish EKN and SEK, we're able to minimize capital expenditure for our local partners and instead apply a pay-as-you-go principle, making deployment quick and operations uncomplicated. A digital twin dashboard makes it easy to monitor and optimize for eco-footprint as well as for cost reduction. Our solution is sustainable. Because we can use any water source, even non-conventional water resources, and because our system is so efficient, we get a yield of up to 85% from source to mouth, compared to the inverse for much of the fixed infrastructures in place today. Because we eliminate long-distance transport and single-use plastic, because our system can be solar-powered, and because we don't use any chemicals in the treatment process, we cut out a lot of CO2 and microplastics and toxic chemicals. Because our concept is completely decentralized, based on distributed local microfactories with very long life cycle, we're highly resilient to any change, expected or unexpected. Someone said, if a system can't be universally applied, it's not a just system. Our systems can be deployed anywhere on Earth, with the same output everywhere, creating highest quality water at low cost, and creating green jobs and positive cascade effects on everything from health to economic prospects. Oh, here it is, the picture with that big tsunami-like breaker I mentioned in the beginning. But let's look again at the real ominous tidal wave that we've created for ourselves. A surge that got its energy from the exploitation of fossil fuel, enabling population growth, leading to the overuse of resources and to single-use culture, accelerating global warming and natural disasters, and of course water stress, in a roaring, rumbling feedback loop, tumbling over tipping points and people, and threatening to crush everything we take for granted today. Wayout's approach is to contribute to calming the sea and to enable us humans to float our boats gently down the stream so that we, as a species, may be allowed to stick around a while longer. This is Jumana and Hector. Jumana from Jordan is our head of pilot projects. Hector from Mexico is our head of R&D. We are Wayout from Sweden, based in the UAE. Come have a glass of water with us in Stockholm or Dubai, and let's be the change together. Thanks for listening, guys. And now let's turn to possibly questions or discussions. If anyone has anything on their mind, we're ready to answer anything.
Hi, Martin. It's Jenny here. Thanks for a fantastic presentation. There are already some questions in the chat. So maybe I'll read them out loud. Hello,
Please.
Martin. Yeah, hello, Martin. Thank you for your presentation and sharing the idea behind Wayout. I was wondering where your target group is, as the product looks very fancy and expensive for rural communities who do not have access to water or monetary sources at all. Could you elaborate more on this, maybe? Thanks in advance. And then she continues, like, who pays the cost of implementation? Is it governments, individuals, communities? I'm curious.
Well, thank you. I can't remember your name, but thank you very much for your question. And of course, it's a good one in this context. Here's how we, and also thank you for your kind words about the design and what it looks like. Of course, here's the thing. It is very expensive to develop these things, and that cost is on us, and at this stage on our investors, I'm afraid to say. Hope they're not looking. The way we solve it is that we have a debt financing model where we carry this cost in loans from banks that grant us these loans, so that there's no capital expenditure on the leaseholder end. So it's a pay-as-you-go model, really. So what we expect in return from the clients that we let operate our systems is simply a monthly rent based on what water they put out. Optimally, already at this stage, we expect people to be able to sell the water either through subsidies, through organizations or things like that, or funds, or simply by charging the end consumer for the water. At this stage, we're not really optimized for the access to water situation that you're describing in rural areas. Today, we have plenty of systems deployed in urban areas where we mainly cater to workplaces, schools, and offices with a lot of people and footfall. So that's where we started to deploy them. Hope that answers your question. Were there any other, Jenny?
Not in the chat, but actually now we're gonna let any one of you ask questions, so you can actually Rickard is going to allow anyone to ask questions. So if you want to ask, you don't have to write questions. There are now, Martin, some more questions here, and also thanks. Anna said, fantastic presentation, Martin. Thank you. Very engaging and inspiring. And then from Paul, interesting presentation.
Thank you, Anna.
I work with kiosks in rural areas in Kenya. What is the cost of water per liter to clients?
We have a system in Kenya. It's located on a rooftop terrace downtown. I'm not aware of the exact per liter price. It totally depends, of course, on who you turn to and who you expect to pay for it. I would guess it would be around just a couple of cents on the market. And in Kenya, I know that there are many different types of water that is accessible. You have the water ATMs, you have the tanker cars coming and delivering some sort of okay potable water, and then you of course have the single-use bottled water that can cost anything from a couple of cents up to almost a dollar, I guess, on the market. But for our price on the market in Kenya, I can't answer that really. But our ambition is to always be lower than the available unsustainable alternatives like single-use plastic, for example. And also remember, the quality of our water is different than what you get from a water ATM or a tanker car. That water probably won't kill you anytime soon, but it's not really of optimal quality, and that's what we're aiming for also. But we do want to target a price point that's lower than the available unsustainable alternatives.
Thank you, Martin. There is one more question from Victor. Are there any deployments for drawing the water from seawater, small island states? Question mark.
Yes, good question. Thank you for that. We pride ourselves actually in being able to do that, which is really important, especially like you mentioned in small island nations. So we do have activities today on Madagascar, and we're looking to deploy also in the Maldives and on Seychelles, Réunion, Mayotte, Mauritius, and places like that in the Indian Ocean. because it's very important. You know, there's not a lot of land to allow for big basins or centralized water treatment plants, because you also then suck out all available groundwater or the water table, and then you start introducing salt water into the farming water that you need to irrigate. If you remember what the standard personal water footprint is, more than 93% of that is for growing food. So particularly for small island nations, our systems are tailor-made for that, actually. So we can desalinate, and we do.
Thanks, Martin. One more question from Mark. Have you had any interest from big companies looking to create a public good in their communities, particularly for extractive industries who often operate very close to underserved communities in, for example, many African countries?
We have gotten some attention from, we can call it the big four beverage producers, global. We've also gotten a lot of attention and interest from organizations and NGOs and entities like that, because they see that our system, because we're so quick to deploy, we're turnkey. We just have to lift it in place and put it out there, and then we can start producing water instantly. It's a good alternative, specifically for regions where there is no infrastructure to speak of, really, and also because we can be completely autonomous and draw the power from the sun and the water from anywhere. So sure, we have been getting some interest from those entities, but I wish there were more. What I can say in their defense is that there are so many available options to pick and choose from. We're quite new already, so we haven't had the chance to reach out in the way that we would have liked. But if any one of those are listening now, it's we're here and we can do this together if you want. So sure, we're open for any kind of collaborations, of course.
There are no more questions in the chat, just a few comments like excellent presentation from Carolina and from Reba. And Mark thanks you for the response.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your kind words. Really appreciate it. And it's been fun speaking with you. I would love it if anyone listening now would have any, like live questions, so we can pick up a discussion now if you want. If you're shy like me and you don't want to speak online, that's cool too. We can just sit and look at each other for another 27 minutes. Jenny, if you open up the space for conversation and input from anyone attending, that would be great.
Yeah, I believe it's already open, so anyone who wants to.
Mark wants to say something. Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Martin. I'm just checking if you can hear me.
We hear you. We hear
Great. Yeah, one of the things that I think is interesting, so I'm from South Africa and working across the African continent on sustainability more broadly. But certainly in the South African context, our water infrastructure is attracting a lot of attention because it's starting to see some of those failings that you mentioned in your presentation. And this is kind of on the back of an energy crisis. And what's happened on the energy side is wherever people can afford it, they're starting to do solar installations at home to kind of get around it. And on the water side, there's an increase, again, for those with resources in digging boreholes and putting in similar systems. I'm kind of curious at a household level, how easy is it to kind of downscale this and make it available at a kind of an individual household level, so sort of for kind of 4 to 10 people?
Good question. Thank you. I mean, totally, we feel the issues that are ongoing in South Africa. We followed closely that year zero scare that we had the other year, and also, on the general water stress or lack of water, which is a combination, of course, of climate and natural circumstances, but also mismanagement, I would say. So for individual households, the way we work is that we produce the water in these micro factories that can produce up to 20,000 liters per day, enough for 10,000 people, let's say. And then we distribute the water in 10-liter stainless steel kegs. So if we locate one of our microfactories, let's say in a housing area in a district like that, we can distribute these kegs to any household that want to subscribe or that want to be part of it. So we don't at this stage do any micro pica treatment of the water itself. We still have the microfactories this is how we do it. It's a one size fits all. But the whole idea is to locate these locally, so we can be in a township or a housing area or an airport or something, and put out 20,000 liters every day and distribute it in these kegs and also dispensers, so that anyone that needs the water can actually access it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm going to start reading out names here that I see to challenge you to say something. No, just kidding.
Martin, there is one more question in the chat
Okay.
from Reba. Desalination is energy intensive. Why not use recycled water for non-potable purposes?
We do use recycled water also, and I agree with you. Desalination is energy intense. When you do desalination on a small scale like we do, it's not the same energy intensity as you need when you do the major centralized desalination plants, of course. But we can still keep it low. But I agree with you. It's really important that we use already produced water, like gray water or wastewater that has been around once. We can use that because it has been treated. A lot of that type of water picks up a lot of contaminants. Worst case is that you get a lot of industrial chemicals in it, and that's tough to remove also on the level of desalination. So, but for gray water and general city wastewater, we use that too. And that's really important. And if you think about what non-conventional water resources there are, it's not only that type of water, it's even condensation water from air conditioning systems in shopping malls and stuff like that. So there is a lot of used water, like you say, that we can utilize, and we want to do that as much as possible, because that's one of the things that we designed our systems to be able to do. Reba, yes.
Yes, sorry, I am not on my video, but I just can speak verbally. That's thank you, Martin. That's a very good response. But my concern is that the energy, in fact, very much increasing due to water stress, because due to urbanization, that's most of the cities, particularly, they have exhausted their local water bodies, and they are now moving to distant sources of water to like 100, 200 kilometers. Even some cities are bring water to supply water to the city people. And also that there is also over extraction of groundwater. So groundwater also, that's they are in fact drawing from very deep aquifer that also needs very good amount of energy. So all these are very energy intensive, and desalination is still energy intensive, though lot of innovations are there how to reduce the energy consumptions. But because this is because of the centralized systems, that if you like to recycle water through centralized system, it is very expensive and energy intensive, because you have to supply back the water to far distance. So how to go to the distributed systems that water utility can give attention, that's not going to the very large system, but between small and large systems, how that energy can be reduced, and also recycled water can be reused. That was my concern. I think that way, I think we can also reduce the fresh water withdrawal, and also we can reduce the unsustainable use of water resources. And thank
Yeah.
you for your excellent presentation.
Thank you, Reba. And I totally agree with you because, you know, what you're talking about is the problems with having centralized water treatment plants. Even though they're using used water, they then need to collect it and they need to slurp it up from a catchment area that is so large. So the energy to actually gather this used water is again becoming unsustainable. And that's why we're doing this in a distributed fashion, a decentralized way of going about it, to create a grid or an infrastructure of individual autonomous micro factory systems. So that way we can use secondhand or used water where the water is needed and where the secondhand water is produced. That way we don't need to long pipelines or travel to catch the water and then bring it back to treat it. We treat it locally where it's used and where it's produced, so that we produce what people need to consume on site. So that's exactly what we're doing. And then you're also touching on the fact that, you know, as long as we can use renewable energy resources, because it's all about energy in the end, isn't it? As long as we can utilize renewable energy resources, we're more or less safe. But when you have these huge plants, the energy you require, I mean, you would need half a country of solar panels today to handle that, and it's just not feasible. That's also why we want to break it down into smaller units so that we can produce the water where it's consumed and also recycle the local water. Thank you, Rima.
I don't see any more questions in the chat.
Okay.
Hi. Sorry, I don't know how to lift my hand. Can I ask something?
Of course.
Hi. Oh, I saw your guys are in Stockholm. I'm in Stockholm too, by the way.
Oh,
Anyway,
good, good.
I was wondering about this. You just mentioned if you have tiny plants. I'm sorry, I joined a bit late, so I didn't listen from the start. If you have like the tiny individual plants, you have lower energy usage per unit, right? But how do you fight against the economy of scale of having everything? Once you account, of course, for transportation, maybe that's where you win. But wouldn't it be cheaper to have to process huge amounts of water at the same time rather than here? I don't know.
Well,
In energy terms.
no, I mean, what you're saying makes sense, and it's like a logical first thought that would be the way to do it. But there are so many problems with centralized production. First of all, you basically drain local aquifers or the water table where you are, making farming absolutely impossible in those areas. We see that with big beverage producers. They suck up aquifers and put farmers out of work. But so that's one reason why we want to distribute it, because we can catch water locally in different areas. Because the problem isn't that there isn't any water around the planet. The problem is that the local water isn't safe to drink. So we need to treat it locally. Also, if you do the big centralized plants, you need a lot of electrical cables, you need piping for the water, and then you instantly start to create problems for yourself of maintenance, water loss. You lose a lot of water through pipes and things like that, through evaporation, through cracks, through leaks, and things like this. And also, again, the power needed to run one of those big centralized plants is ginormous. Of course, there will always be centralized plants because we have these mega cities and giga cities that with a lot of billions of people that need their water where they're at. But there are a lot of places around the planet. Remember, 1/3 of humanity lacks access to safe drinking water. That's a lot of people. It's 2.7 billion or something like that. And also, people move around to a greater extent today than what they used to 50 years ago when these systems and these fixed infrastructures were put in place. So we need to relate to producing water small scale locally, like we did when 10,000 years ago when we first settled down. we need to look after our local context, our local community, and be sustainable where we're at. And only then can we be resilient and actually start behaving in a way where we act in balance with our surroundings.
That sounds very cool. I have another question now.
Yeah, please.
What is your growth schedule? Like right now, you are trying to sell to individual places, areas, and so on. Just for context, I intend to build a winery eventually, right?
Okay.
So one of the biggest problems is access to water, of course.
Yes.
How do you make alcohol? And irrigation, of course, irrigation for the grapes and so on. I think your solution could be great. Like if I have a unit of that generates 20,000 liters per day, could be good enough to irrigate some grapes here and there. They don't need too much water anyway. And then could that water be used to produce alcohol, for example, without I don't know what's the degree of sanitization you would require or to make it drinkable.
Your question is interesting, and I wish you all the best with your winery. Hope you're setting it up somewhere where climate change won't eat your grapes before they're ready for harvest. I mean, it's funny that you ask, because our concept started some 5 years ago, where we actually built little microbreweries or micro fermentation plants. So we do have a couple of those out there on the planet today, but we moved away from that because once you handle organics, it's a slightly different challenge in terms of hygiene and downtime and things like this. But we did it because we understood that, the basic, most important raw material in any fermented or beverages like that is, of course, also good quality water. I would say, though, even though it's flattering that you would consider using our systems for irrigation, that would be spoiling your grapes to a little bit too much, or being too kind to your grapes, because our water is also, again, mineralized and treated to such a high degree that it's optimized for human consumption. Okay. I wouldn't recommend you to irrigate with it, because it's simply too fine, and by being so also probably too costly for your needs. You can probably find cheaper ways of doing that. There are sustainable ways of locally treating water good enough to use for irrigation, for example, by doing it through sewage treatment plants that you locally can take care of your own wastewater and irrigate using that.
That makes a lot of sense. And finally, yeah, how well is it going? Again, sorry I joined late, but this is super interesting. I was in something else. How is the reception of the public? How so far?
We're being very well received. We have located our commercial center to Dubai, and I think you can envision how that would be a good place for us to sit at the moment. We have the COP28 coming up. We came there when there was the World Expo. So there's a lot of people there, a lot of interest coming in. There's also a lot of innovation, mainly around actually renewable energy and things like that in that region in the UAE. So we located our commercial center down there, and out of that spot, we're actually now growing. So we are deploying in the UAE. We have a couple of systems in East Africa, and our next tranche is India and the Indian Ocean. So that's the motions that we're doing, and we're getting a lot of good attention because the need for good quality drinking water that you can rely on and also have redundancy in is so great around the planet. But we're still a small company, so we have to start someplace and find a local context for us to establish ourselves and build from there.
Have you talked to the Southern European market? For example, everything around the Mediterranean is getting very dry,
Yes.
Spain, Italy, and so on.
Oh, yeah, we have. I mean, if you think about what used to be the Roman Empire, if the expression is excused, you think about the Middle East and also the Mediterranean, North Africa and Southern Europe. Those are places where you have very low population growth, but also very strong impact by climate change. They say Spain is turning into a desert. We have island nations in the Mediterranean, Greece, Cyprus, Turkey, even Spain with the Balearic Islands. So there's a huge need also for these local micro solutions in and around the Mediterranean, of course.
Amazing. And finally, I cannot find a price in your website. How much for 1 unit?
We lease out the units, or actually the way we do it is that we
Okay.
partner with local drinking water producers and offer them a means to instantly become sustainable and to give them an opportunity to offer another line of products or to create another revenue stream for themselves. So we don't sell these things. That would be way too costly. We lease them out and we use a debt finance model. So it's basically a pay as you go, or you can instantly start producing water locally with our help.
I will call you later then. Awesome.
Yeah, please do. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin, in the meantime, there is another question. You sort of answered this already, but you might be able to elaborate a bit more. So from Florence, where are you currently operating and how many countries are you actively working in at this moment? If you were to expand to other areas, how do you think operation and maintenance costs/activities could look like? Is the product able to be produced and maintained anywhere, or does it need to be produced and shipped from Sweden?
Thank you. All good questions, of course. I think I answered a little bit of those by saying that our commercial center is in Dubai. So this is from where we operate at the moment. We have production in Scandinavia today, together with our industrial partners Alfa Laval in Copenhagen. So we have a factory there where we produce the microfactories. We have a technology partner in Siemens, and then we partner with them locally in the UAE and use them over there for those bits also. To your question on how can we, I interpret it as you ask us how we can set up organization to be able to handle and maintain the systems locally on the ground. I tried to answer that also before, but let's elaborate a little bit on it. We partner with local drinking water producers that already today are established and have a client base and have a distribution network and have all that on the ground. But today, the way you do that is in most cases, you actually distribute single-use plastic, either in these 5-gallon jugs, and you put those on one of those typical coolers for schools, workplaces, campuses, and stuff like that. Or you sell maybe 12 packs of 1.5 liter plastic packaged drinking water. So we come in and offer these companies and organizations another way of doing their business by offering a completely sustainable product portfolio instead, or a product line. So, and they already have the organization. So we, on our end, take the full responsibility for the technology, our technology, and the way it works, and the maintenance and repairs and spares and consumables and things that are needed to operate the systems. But the operation and the distribution and the sales is taken care of by local drinking water producers. So that's how we handle that. Were there any questions within there that I missed, Jenny? Help me out.
No, I think you answered the questions, and there are no new questions.
Excellent. So then you have 6 minutes for a fika, Swedish cinnamon buns and coffee typically. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. And please reach out to us if you want to talk about something else, or if you want to move off line and talk over email or anything. You have the contact details here. It's simply wayout.com. You'll find us there. And let's continue the dialogue. And everyone, take care of yourself. And for those of you that are in Stockholm, enjoy. And the rest of you hope to see you somewhere along the line. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.